I never thought my brother's wedding toast would be the moment everything finally broke open. One second I was sitting at table 7, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't touched, and the next my brother was standing at the microphone in his rented tuxedo, thanking every single person in that ballroom, our parents, his new in-laws, his college roommates, even the florist while I sat there, the person who had written the check for nearly all of it, completely invisible. People clapped. People cried. My mother dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed napkin I had ordered, and my brother Daniel looked right past me like I was part of the furniture. What he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I had already made a decision before the salad course arrived. A quiet one, a permanent one. My name is Claire, and for most of my adult life, I have been the kind of person people describe as dependable, steady, the one you call when something needs to get done. I'm 31 years old. I work in financial planning for a mid-size firm in Austin, Texas, and I am very good at managing money. Everyone in my family knows this. What they chose not to know, or maybe chose to forget, is that for the past several years, I had been managing theirs too. Growing up, Daniel was the charming one. 3 years younger, naturally funny. The kind of person who walks into a room and immediately becomes the center of it. My parents adored that about him. I was quieter, more serious, the one who actually read the fine print and showed up on time. My dad used to call Daniel his personality kid in this warm, laughing way that was never meant to sting. It always did, a little. But I told myself that was just how families were. Some kids are the sunlight, some kids are the soil. Soil doesn't need the credit. It just holds everything up. I got my degree in finance, got a real job, moved to Austin at 24 with 2 suitcases and a 10-year plan. Daniel moved back home at 25 after a startup he'd joined as a founding team member quietly collapsed after 18 months. He wasn't devastated. He was already pitching the next idea at the dinner table before the boxes were unpacked. The first time I lent him money, I told myself it was a one-time thing. He needed $1,800 to cover a gap while he waited on a freelance check. I transferred it on a Tuesday. The check, as far as I know, never came. He never brought it up again, and neither did I, because bringing it up felt smaller than just letting it go. That was my first mistake. Not the transfer, the silence. After that came the car. His transmission failed on the highway outside San Antonio, and he called me from the shoulder in a panic. My parents were sympathetic but tight on cash. I paid the repair shop directly, 2300美元. Daniel was grateful for about a week, then moved on. Then came the rent gap just 1 month, he said, while he sorted out a billing issue with a client. Then another month, then a third. By the time I stopped counting, I had quietly covered nearly $11,000 across 3 years, not including the small things. The utility bill here, the birthday dinner there, the time I bought him a new laptop because his old one died and he had a big presentation Monday morning. I never asked for any of it back. I told myself it was family. I told myself he'd get there eventually. When Daniel met his fiancée, I was genuinely happy for him. She seemed grounded, warm, the kind of steadiness I always hoped someone would bring into his life. The engagement happened fast 8 months in, and by Christmas, they were already talking venues. Our parents were ecstatic. My mother immediately started pinning tablescapes, and my father started telling his friends his son was getting married, like he'd personally accomplished something. It was sweet, in its way. I smiled through all of it. Then the planning started, and the calls started, and slowly, piece by piece, I began to understand what this wedding was going to cost and who was expected to absorb it. The venue deposit came first. Daniel called me one Thursday evening, casual as always, his voice carrying that particular lightness he uses when he wants something he knows he can't ask for directly. He mentioned that the venue they loved required a $4,000 deposit to hold the date. He mentioned it the way people mention the weather, just a fact, sitting there between us, waiting. I knew what he was asking without him asking it. I said I'd think about it. I called him back 2 days later and told him I'd cover it. He told me I was the best. He said it like that. Exactly, you're seriously the best. Claire and I could hear him smiling through the phone. Over the following 7 months, I became the silent infrastructure of my brother's wedding. The catering deposit, the photographer's retainer, $2,200 because they wanted someone editorial. The florist consultation fee, the shuttle bus for guests traveling from out of town, the hotel room block I coordinated and paid the hold fee on because Daniel said the logistics were too complicated for him to manage during a busy week. Our mother contributed a few $100s here and there, mostly to things she could tell people about the mother of the groom corsage, a small rehearsal dinner contribution. My father gave a toast fund of $500, which was generous by his standards and not enough for anything by the real-world standards. I never announced any of it. I told myself I didn't need to. I wired amounts, I sent confirmations, I handled vendor emails from my work inbox on lunch breaks. Daniel thanked me in texts, enthusiastic ones, full of exclamation points. My parents knew in a vague, comfortable way that Claire was helping with some of the logistics. They didn't ask for specifics. People rarely ask for the specifics of things they're benefiting from. By the wedding weekend, I had spent just over $23,000 on my brother's marriage to a woman I genuinely liked, and whose wedding I had functionally planned and funded while holding down a full-time job, and telling myself this was what love looked like in a family like ours. The rehearsal dinner was Friday night. Small Italian restaurant, private back room. Daniel stood at the head of the table and thanked his in-laws for their generosity, thanked his groomsmen for showing up, thanked his fiancée for being patient with him, thanked my parents for raising him to believe in love. He looked at me once, across a bowl of bread and a flickering candle, and said, "And Claire, always keeping everything organized." A few people smiled. Someone nodded. The moment passed in under 4 seconds. I refilled my water glass. I drove home that night on the highway with the windows down even though it was 55 degrees because I needed the cold. I sat in my car in the parking garage of my apartment complex for 11 minutes before going inside. I wasn't angry, exactly. I was calculating. I had spent most of my adult life in the role of the quiet foundation, and it had cost me more than money. It had cost me the habit of expecting to be seen. And sitting there in the dark of my car, I started to wonder, quietly, whether I was going to let the wedding happen the way the rehearsal dinner had, whether I was going to smile through another toast and drive home alone again, or whether I was going to finally do something that felt honest. I didn't decide anything that night, but I started to look. I opened my laptop around midnight and pulled up every payment confirmation I had saved over the past 7 months, organized in a folder I had labeled, without irony, Daniel Wedding. The total was right there, exact and unambiguous. I had paid for 74% of the wedding my brother was about to take credit for in front of 200 guests. The venue, the food, the photographer who would make it all look beautiful forever, the flowers that would photograph better than they smelled, the shuttle that would get the in-laws back to their hotel safely. All of it, mine. I closed the laptop. I didn't do anything with the information yet. I just let myself hold it. The wedding day was genuinely beautiful. The venue was a restored ranch property outside Austin, all warm wood beams and string lights, the kind of place that looks like something from a magazine. The ceremony was outdoors, under a cluster of live oak trees, and the light at 4 o'clock was exactly the shade of gold that makes everyone look like they stepped out of a memory. I wore a green dress I had bought for the occasion. I sat in the front row next to my parents and watched my brother cry when he saw his bride at the end of the aisle, and I felt something real. He loves her. That part was never the question. The reception began at 6. Dinner was served in rounds. The catering team moving efficiently through tables, and everything, the food, the service, the table arrangements, the floral centerpieces was exactly what I had coordinated, confirmed, and paid for. I sat at my assigned table, table 7, with a few family friends and a cousin from my father's side, and I watched my brother move through the room like someone who had built this from nothing. Then came the toast. Daniel took the microphone after the first course was cleared. He was comfortable up there, easy, the way he always was in front of people. He talked about love, about finding the right person, about how grateful he was. He thanked his new in-laws by name, both of them individually, with specific memories. He thanked his groomsmen one by one. He thanked the venue coordinator, a woman I had emailed 43 times by her first name, which I had given him. He thanked my parents warmly, beautifully, said my mother had taught him to love openly, and my father had taught him to work hard. The room murmured with appreciation. He did not say my name. Not once. Not a mention of the deposit, the catering, the photographers who were capturing this moment on equipment I had essentially funded. Nothing. He raised his glass, the guests raised theirs, and the moment was over. My mother leaned toward me and whispered, "He's just nervous, honey. You know how he gets." She patted my hand and turned back toward the dance floor where Daniel was already pulling his bride out for their first dance. I looked down at my champagne glass. Then I picked up my phone. I had kept every email, every wire confirmation, every vendor contract with my name in the signature line. Every text from Daniel saying, "You're seriously the best," Claire followed by a specific dollar amount I had just agreed to send. I had kept all of it in that folder, organized the way I organize everything, cleanly, completely, without drama. I excused myself from the table quietly, the way I had learned to do everything. I walked toward the back hallway near the catering entrance, found a quiet stretch of wall between two closed doors, and I stood there for a moment with my phone in my hand. I thought about the $1,800 from 3 years ago, the car repair, the rent months, the laptop, the $23,000 that had turned a rented ranch property into the most beautiful night of my brother's life. I thought about the rehearsal dinner toast and the 4 seconds I had received. I thought about my mother saying he's just nervous, the way she had always found the explanation that kept Daniel comfortable and asked me to adjust. I thought about whether I was going to go back to table 7 and smile for the photographer who I was paying. And I decided, quietly, the same way I decided everything, that I was not. I opened my contacts and called my bank. Not to do anything dramatic, not to freeze an account or reverse a wire. Most of what I had paid was already spent, already eaten, already photographed. What I did was simpler and in some ways more permanent. I called to close a joint savings account that Daniel and I had opened 2 years ago when he briefly convinced me to invest together in something that never materialized. There was $4,200 in it, mostly my contributions. I had forgotten about it until that morning when I was reviewing my accounts with the same thoroughness I bring to everything. I requested the closure and the transfer of funds to my individual account. The representative confirmed it would process within 2 business days. I thanked her and hung up. Then I opened my email and drafted a single message. Not to my brother. To the family group thread, the one my mother had created 3 years ago and named the Hendersons, which included my parents, my brother, and me. I had never sent anything to that thread except logistics, dinner times, holiday arrival hours. The kind of information that keeps a family coordinated without ever getting into anything real. This one was different. I didn't write it in anger. I sat there in that back hallway with the sound of the reception band drifting under the door, and I wrote it the way I write everything at work, clearly, with documentation attached. I explained that I was proud of Daniel and genuinely happy for him and his wife. I said the wedding was beautiful, and I hoped they would be happy. Then I said simply that I wanted the family to have an accurate record of what the evening had cost and who had paid for it, because I realized I had made a habit of letting that kind of information stay invisible, and I didn't think that had served any of us well. I attached the folder, every confirmation, every vendor email, every payment, organized by date, labeled clearly. I said I wasn't asking to be repaid, because I understood the money was already spent. What I was asking for was honesty, from all of us, including myself, about the dynamic that had been operating in our family for a long time. I said I loved them. I said I would be taking some space. I said goodnight. I scheduled the email to send at 11:59 that night, after the reception ended. Then I went back to table 7, finished my dinner, danced once with a cousin I genuinely liked, hugged the bride warmly because I meant it, and left at 9:30, which is when I had always planned to leave. I drove home with the windows up this time. The heat was on. I felt for the first time in years like the temperature in my own life was something I was controlling. My phone started at 12:04 a.m. My mother first, then a long pause, then again. My father, 2 calls in a row. Daniel, 6 texts in the span of 9 minutes, beginning with "Claire, what is this?" and escalating quickly through confusion, and then something that looked a lot like panic. I read them all. I did not respond. I made myself a cup of tea, sat at my kitchen table in the quiet of my apartment, and let the phone vibrate against the wood like a thing that no longer had power over me. The next morning, my mother called at 7:45. I let it ring. She called again at 8. I answered the third one. She was not yelling. My mother rarely yells. She uses a particular tone instead, soft, concerned, slightly wounded, that has always been more effective on me than yelling would have been. She said she understood I was upset, but that I had to understand this wasn't the right moment, that Daniel was on his honeymoon, that what I had sent had really hurt him, that the family was shaken. She said she wished I had come to her privately instead of sending something like that to everyone. I listened to all of it. I let her finish. Then I said, as evenly as I could manage, "Mom, I paid for 74% of that wedding. He did not say my name once in that toast. I have been paying for things in this family for years and treating it like it was normal. I'm not angry, but I'm done pretending it didn't happen." There was a long silence. She said, "We didn't know it was that much." I said, "Yes, you did. You just didn't ask." Another silence, longer. She said she needed some time. I told her I understood. I told her I loved her because I do, and I meant it because that was never the complicated part. My father called that afternoon. He was more direct, more uncomfortable, the way men in my family get when they've been handed information they don't know what to do with. He said he appreciated what I'd done and that I shouldn't have had to carry that alone, and that Daniel needed to be held accountable. He said it like it was a new thought, freshly discovered, which maybe it was. I thanked him for saying it. I told him I hoped he'd say it to Daniel too. Daniel called from his honeymoon 3 days later. I saw his name on the screen and I felt something shift in my chest, not anger, something older and sadder than anger. I answered. He started to apologize and it was real. I could hear the difference. He wasn't performing. He said he hadn't realized, which I believed. And then he said he should have realized, which I believed more. He said the toast was careless. He said he'd been so caught up in the day that he hadn't thought about what it meant for me to be sitting in that room. He said he was sorry. Then he said he was going to pay me back, all of it, even if it took a long time. I told him I didn't need him to pay me back. I needed him to stop needing me to cover things and then act like they appeared from nowhere. I told him the money wasn't the injury. The invisibility was. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I hear you, just that." And somehow it was enough to start with. I didn't go to the family dinner the following month. My mother called to ask why. I told her I was taking some time to figure out what my role in this family looked like going forward, and that I hoped she'd give me the space to do that. She said she'd try. She's not always great at trying, but she said it. I did go to Thanksgiving. I sat at the table I've sat at my whole life, ate the green bean casserole I have always secretly found mediocre, and watched my family move around each other in the new, slightly awkward way people move when the invisible architecture of a relationship has just been made visible. Daniel was different with me. Not perfectly different old habits don't dissolve in a season, but genuinely trying in the specific way that matters, which is the way where someone actually changes their behavior, rather than just talking about changing it. He picked up the tab at dinner without being asked. He introduced me to people at a party as the smartest person in our family. And I mean that literally. Small things, real things. I have learned, slowly, that the cost of being the dependable one is not the money. It's the years spent believing that keeping quiet was the same as keeping the peace, that absorbing everything was the same as holding the family together, that staying invisible was somehow more generous than being seen. I still work in financial planning. I still like spreadsheets. I still show up when it matters. But I show up now as someone who has decided that the soil deserves to know what it grew. If any part of this felt familiar, you are not alone. Leave a comment and tell me where you're watching from. And if you want more stories like this one, subscribe. I'm just getting started.